the lymphatic system. So when you're studying this chapter, I would advise you to study this along with the defense system and human nutrition and also the circulatory system, because they are linked. So we're going to look at the lymphatic system now. So the lymphatic system, it's part of the immune system and it's directly linked to the circulatory system as well. So the lymphatic system, what does it consist of? So it consists of lymph vessels and lymph nodes, and they both have many functions, which we'll look at in this chapter. So it can be thought of a type of circulatory system as it collects excess fluid that's surrounding the cells, and then it will return that back to the blood. So this fluid is called interstitial fluid, or mostly known as extracellular fluid. So we're going to look at what is in this fluid and how this fluid is formed. So it's formed by plasma leaking from the capillaries. And it's leaking from the capillaries because capillaries have very thin walls, 1 cell thick. So just reminding you there, if you ever mention thin walls, you must follow this by 1 cell thick. So the plasma leaks due to blood pressure in our capillaries. So most of the fluid, so 90% of the fluid, will diffuse back into the bloodstream to reform as plasma. So the remaining 10% will form lymph. Now, what is lymph? So we're going to talk about lymph in detail, but we can just add here to our notes. We can say that first off, lymph is colourless. There is no colour there. So lymph is colourless. And what's in it? The main thing that's in it is fats. Okay. Some plasma, lymphocytes, and protein. Okay, lymph, it's colourless. What's in it? Fats, plasma, lymphocytes, and protein. I'm just going to fix there. Okay, so the structure of our lymphatic system consists of lymph vessels, lymph nodes, spleen, tonsils, adenoids, lacteals, and thymus. Now, organs associated with our lymphatic system. So this could be a question. Organs associated. With lymphatic system. So that's your spleen, tonsils, and thymus. Now the structure or the network of the lymphatic system, we're just going to add this in here as well. So the network . Okay, so we have lymph vessels. Inside the lymph vessels, we have lymph. So we have lymph vessels inside this, inside the vessels equals lymph. And along the vessels is lymph nodes. So if I enlarge this image here, we have our tonsils, which we said is an organ associated with the lymph, along with our spleen, lymphatic system, and our thymus gland. So they are the organs, if I just put an O there, they are the organs associated with our lymphatic system. What you see here in green, that's part of your lymphatic system. So we have lymph vessels. So all along these green lines, they are your lymph vessels. Then we have lymph nodes. So lymph nodes are here. So your lymph nodes, the main thing with your lymph nodes is they're going to filter bacteria. So we're going to look at this now. Our spleen filters our blood. So our spleen removes our dead red blood cells, removes the old red blood cells. So let's look at this now. I'm going to put this here. So lymph vessels. Lymph vessels are blind ending. So they're blind ending tubes. And what they carry is our lymph. So many lymph vessels have valves. So they're similar to veins in that way they have valves. What do valves do? Valves prevent backflow. Their walls are thin. Thin walls, 1 cell thick. So I just said that before. When we say thin walls, we say 1 cell thick. So here is our lymph vessel here. It's blind ending. It carries and transports lymph. It has valves. Valves prevent the backflow of lymph, and the walls are thin, 1 cell thick. Along this then, here we have our lymph nodes. And your lymph nodes, what are they? They are small swellings along the lymph vessels. That's what they are. What, if I write here, what are they? Small swellings along the lymph vessels. What's their role? They have a very important role. Their function is to filter bacteria. It will also produce and store white blood cells, lymphocytes. But what's very, very important is that they filter our lymph nodes. One of the functions, so I write down, I'm going to write here now, FNT for function. It's going to filter bacteria. That's the first function. It'll produce white blood cells and it will store white blood cells. These white blood cells are your lymphocytes. Okay, so they are found in your lymph nodes. Your lymph, which we talked about before, is colourless. So it consists of white. So what is that not there? What is not in lymph is red blood cells and platelets. Okay, so that's very important. What is not in lymph is red blood cells and platelets. They are not there. What is there is we have our plasma, we have some white blood cells, we have some proteins, and we have fats. And those fats have come from the digestive system. Those fats are fatty acids and glycerol, which have been broken down by lipase. And these have been broken down by lipase in the duodenum. Within the duodenum, the nutrients, so like your glucose, your amino acids, they will be absorbed into the blood vessels surrounding your villus. But the fatty acids and the glycerol, they will get absorbed into the lacteal. Okay, and then the lacteal will join up with the lymph vessels to form part of the lymphatic system. Now, the tissue fluid. This tissue fluid is known as extracellular fluid. So it's a liquid that's going to be forced out of the capillaries at the arterial end. And that's due to high pressure. Red blood cells will not be forced out. Red blood cells will not be forced out. So they will stay there. So there's going to be no red blood cells. Now, your tissue fluid, this is important, can be drained in 2 ways. So 90% of this extracellular tissue fluid is going to be drawn back into the capillaries near the venule end, near the veins. 10% is going to form lymph. So there's 2 main vessels that we need to know at leaving cert. There's the thoracic duct and the lymphatic duct. And what they will do is the lymph will be traveling along there, and these ducts, both of these ducts, will empty back into the bloodstream at the subclavian vein up here. So there's 2 main vessels, the thoracic duct and the right lymphatic duct. And what they will do is they will empty this lymph back into the bloodstream at the subclavian veins. So that is important. And where would you find them? You find them under your collarbone. Now we're going to look at how is lymph formed, because they could ask us that. How is lymph formed? So I'm just going to show you this picture here. Okay, so just zooming in. So we have our artery. So your artery is carrying oxygenated blood from the heart. From your artery will branch off and become a little bit smaller, and that's called your arteriole. Okay, so here we're pointing is your arteriole. From your arteriole, we will have lots of capillaries. The capillaries so then get even smaller. So the capillaries then lead into venules, and the venules lead back to the vein. And here we know this is a vein, because we have valves here. Valves to prevent backflow. What you can see here in the yellow or the cream, this is your part of your lymphatic system. And if you look closely, we can also see here that they have valves here. So we have our arteries. From our arteries, it's branching off into arterioles. From your arterioles, it's to the capillaries. Okay. From your capillaries, it's then going to get a little bit wider to your veins and your venule, and your venule is going to link up with your vein. Now, if we look in then again inside this picture, we can see lots of cells. Okay, so we can see lots of cells here. We know these are cells. We can see the nucleus. Now, surrounding the cells, this white. So surrounding the cells, that's called your extracellular fluid. Okay, so the extracellular fluid surrounds the cells. And from your extracellular fluid, cells can absorb oxygen and cells can absorb glucose. And that oxygen and glucose will be involved in respiration. So surrounding the cells is extracellular fluid. So that means waste products such as carbon dioxide. That carbon dioxide can go into the extracellular fluid. And these substances, that carbon dioxide, urea, they will go into the extracellular fluid surrounding the tissues. And they will then be reabsorbed at the veins. And they'll be reabsorbed here at the veins by diffusion. So we're going to go through this now. So as long as we understand we have our arteries, our arterioles, our capillaries, leading to your venule and your vein. In between these blood vessels are lots and lots of cells. The cells surrounding the fluid is called extracellular fluid. And we can see from this diagram there's some arrows coming from the capillaries here into the extracellular fluid, and there's some arrows coming out of the extracellular fluid in towards the veins. So we're going to look at the substances now, and we're going to look at how all this is formed. So I'm going to zoom back out. So blood is constantly being pumped from your arteries to arterioles, to the capillaries, to the venules, and finally to the veins. So the blood at the arterial end is going to be under much higher pressure in comparison to the blood at the venual end. So because there is higher pressure at the arterial end compared to the venual end, some fluid is forced from the blood is forced out. Okay, so if I go back here, we have our artery, our arteriole. So we can see it's getting smaller. So there's going to be much higher pressure here. And because of this higher pressure here, some of the blood is going to be forced out here at the capillary end into the fluid here, our extracellular fluid. Go back up. So this fluid is called extracellular fluid. It's the same as plasma. So remember, plasma has our red blood cells, our white blood cells, and our platelets. So let's just remind ourselves of that, what's in plasma. So in plasma, we have red blood cells, we have white blood cells, and we have platelets. In this extracellular fluid, the same as plasma, what is not there is there's no red blood cells and there's no platelets. So that is a difference between between the plasma and our extracellular fluid. So plasma contains red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. Extracellular fluid does not have red blood cells. So they are too large to pass through, and it does not have platelets. So the fluid can be returned in one of two ways. So most of it's going to be reabsorbed at the venule end by the capillaries. By what process? By diffusion. And remember, diffusion is the movement of molecules from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. The rest of this extracellular fluid, that's going to be taken up by the lymph vessel, and that is going to be called lymph. So lymph It'll move along the lymph vessel due to normal body movements. So that's your muscular contraction. Muscular contraction is peristalsis. Peristalsis, waves of muscular contraction. And what that will do is going to squeeze the lymph along. And as I mentioned before, lymph have valves to prevent backflow. So the lymph vessels will join together to form lymph ducts. We mentioned before, what are these two ducts? The right lymphatic duct and the thoracic duct. And these two ducts, the right lymphatic duct and the thoracic duct, are going to join back. So these ducts are going to empty the lymph back into the blood at the subclavian vein, which is just under the collarbone. So that's how our lymph is formed. So I'm just going to write here EC, just for shorthand, just for the notes. You wouldn't write this in an exam. So I'm going to write here that our extracellular fluid surrounds the cells, and the cells absorb glucose and oxygen from it, it being the extracellular fluid. So the cells release carbon dioxide and urea into the extracellular fluid. So these substances are going to be returned back into the bloodstream at the capillary end by diffusion. So substances through the capillaries by diffusion. So CO2, carbon dioxide, is a waste product. So it's a waste product from respiration. And carbon dioxide is dissolved within the blood. And that's how carbon dioxide travels in the blood. It's dissolved within the blood. And eventually this vein here is going to go to the heart. And if it goes up to the heart, the blood that's going to enter the heart is going to enter by the vena cava. Okay, so then it will go through the atrium, the ventricle. It'll lead by the pulmonary artery up towards the lungs, where gas exchange will take place, and that CO2 will diffuse from the capillaries across into the alveoli, and it's going to be where we breathe it out. So that's one of the waste products. So when I say the heart here, I'm just going to write here, it's the vena cava. And then enter, from the vena cava, it will enter the right atrium. So blood is going to be under pressure at the arterial end, which is going to force some of the substances out from the blood vessels in towards the fluid here, your extracellular fluid. What will stay in the blood is your red blood cells and your platelets. They'll stay in the blood. So surrounding all the cells is the fluid, and that's your extracellular fluid. What is not there within that is red blood cells and platelets. Oxygen, glucose is in this fluid. They will be absorbed from the extracellular fluid into the cells, and the cells are going to use it. There'll be some waste products that will come out of the cells through chemical reactions, such as respiration, for example, will be CO2. CO2 is then going to come out of the cell into this fluid, this extracellular fluid. But that CO2 and the urea that is formed will go back into the capillaries by the process of diffusion. The substances that do not get absorbed back into the capillaries by diffusion form lymph. Now, the substances that form lymph will end up coming in here. Let me just get this bigger. Looks like a tree branch. This is part of your lymph vessels. So the substances, which is about 10%, that does not get reabsorbed back at the veins, is going to form lymph. And it's going to come in here. Okay. So now, they may ask us, where would you find lymph? and we'd find lymph inside the vessel. So that's the location. So inside the lymph vessel. What does lymph consist of? So it consists of plasma. It consists of lymphocytes, which are a type of white blood cells. Okay, so what it doesn't have red blood cells, it doesn't have platelets. It does have fats. And the fats is your fatty acid and your glycerol. Plasma, where would you find plasma? You find plasma in the blood. Plasma, what does it consist of? It consists of red blood cells. It consists of platelets. And it consists of white blood cells. Extracellular fluid. Where would you find our extracellular fluid? So we're going to find our extracellular fluid surrounding and in between all the cells. So in between the cells, because it's so fine. In between and surrounding the cells. What's in it? Plasma. There could be oxygen there. There could be CO2 there. There could plasma. So what will not be there? So I'm going to say here. What will not be there is red blood cells and white blood cells. So how does lymph differ from blood? This is a popular question. Not how. Okay, so I'm just going to write here. What does blood have? Blood has our red blood cells. Blood has platelets and white blood cells. But the question asks, how does it differ? So blood has red blood cells and platelets, or lymph. How does it differ? So your lymph has no red blood cells, no platelets, no clotting proteins. And what it does have a higher fat content. It does have fats. And has white blood cells. Another question could be, structurally, how do lymph vessels differ from arteries? And structurally, lymph vessels have valves to prevent backflow. Arteries do not have valves. So that's one structural difference. We're going to say lymph vessels have valves. Arteries do not. Lymph vessels are blind ending, whereas arteries are not blind ending. So blind ending lymph vessels are eventually joined up with the thoracic and the right lymphatic duct, which will end up joining up with the subclavian vein. So lymph vessels are blind ending, arteries are not blind ending. Okay, so that could be a question with this. Now, functions of lymph. Okay, so we're going to look at 3 functions of lymph. Under transport, and give an example. Under maintenance, and give an example. And under defense against disease, and give an example. So what does it transport? It transports fats. Sorry, I spelled that wrong. And it can also transport hormones. Maintenance. What does it maintain? It maintains a constant extracellular fluid level of the fluid. So maintains a constant level of extracellular fluid. What it will do, it'll collect excess extracellular fluid and will transport that back into the blood at the capillary end. Okay, so collects excess extra cellular fluid and return it back to the blood. And I'm going to say here capillaries by diffusion. The defense against disease. What it does, it filters bacteria. It's the lymph nodes that filter bacteria, but it filters bacteria. And the defense we have are, how's that done? That's by your lymphocytes. Lymphocytes in the lymph nodes. So, 3 functions of the lymphatic system we need to know. Transport. What is it transporting? So you'd need to let them know, don't just say transports on its own. It's transporting fats and hormones. It's maintaining a constant level of extracellular fluid for your maintenance. The defense against disease is that it filters bacteria. And what you're doing there is you're qualifying your answer. Okay, so you're qualifying your answer that you really know what you're talking about. Now, here's another nice question. Explain why lymph nodes may sometimes become swollen. So your tonsils, remember we talked about our tonsils. So some of you, mine are gone now, had got them taken out because they were constantly infected. So if your lymph nodes have become swollen, that is a sign that there's an infection there and that they're been fought. So lymph nodes may sometimes swell because it's an indication that an infection is being fought. Okay, so that's the lymphatic system. So after studying this chapter, describe the composition, formation and function of lymph and 3 functions of the lymphatic system. So what we're going to look at now is we're going to look at answer some past paper questions. Okay, so the last time this appeared on the paper was in 2014, so now officially over 10 years ago. So and appeared under a short question, but we're going to have a look at this. So we have here, the diagram shows a region of tissue that includes body cells and parts of the circulatory system and the lymphatic system. So I'm just going to enlarge that there now so you can see. So we have here direction of blood flow and arrow showing where the blood is coming from. Okay, we have vessels surrounding here and something coming out. So from your knowledge of what you know so far, if the direction of the blood, where is it coming from? So with the lymphatic system, the blood is coming from at the artery into the arterial end. And it's showing here an arrow in going around, followed by an arrow out. So what would B be? B would be the veins. But then we have something over here. So over here, I can zoom in again. Surrounding, now it's not part, if I put my yellow pen around here, it's not, I can see that it's not part here. It's off separate. So if I just go here with the green, you can see it's off separate. So what would that be? And I can see there's some valves here. So it's clearly pointing to some valves here. So C would be part of your lymphatic system. C would be your lymph vessel. I can see then I have lots of cells surrounding, and they're in the black dots here, and that would be your extracellular fluid. So it's showing there, these are body cells, and I'm just going to label this for myself as extracellular fluid. Okay. So the diagram at the beginning may be a bit overwhelming. So what you have to do is, what do you know so far? So you can label this part to help you with your answer. Okay, so I took a couple of minutes there looking at that, seeing what the parts were before I jumped into the questions on this to try and help me with to answer the question. So the diagram shows a region of the tissue that includes body cells, which is part of the circulatory system and our lymphatic system. So we do have a bit of a hint here, part of our lymphatic system. So now let's answer the question. Name part C. So part C, which we worked out, part C is our lymph vessel. What type of blood vessel is A? So A, from your artery branching off, then this would be your arteriole. They will accept artery there as well. This is your arteriole end. If a transverse section of A were viewed under the microscope, state one way in which it would differ from B. So we worked out that if this here is showing the direction of the blood flow coming in, so we said that was from our artery to arteriole. The blood is going out, so this is the vein. So now structurally, how is the vein different from that of the artery? So the transverse section of A, which we said was our artery, were viewed on the microscope, state one way in which it would differ from the transverse section of B, we said is our vein. So your artery, the main one structurally, is your artery has no valves, your vein has valves. So that's one. So artery has no valves. Well, so, oops, yeah. Veins have valves. Now you could also say your artery has a large lumen. Veins have a smaller lumen. And you could say arteries have thick walls, veins have thin walls. Okay, say two functions of the lymphatic system. So two functions of our lymphatic system. We have defense against disease, and that's filtering bacteria. So we can write in here, defense against disease. Which filters bacteria. Now I know I gave you two functions for defense against disease. Just use one defense against disease, because we said there's three things that we need to know for the functions of the lymphatic system. It's under maintenance, transport, and defense against disease. So you could say, so don't use defense against disease twice. Go with the other two functions. So we could say transports fats. fats and hormones. And you could say it maintains a constant level of extracellular fluid. So I'm just going to write that in there as a possible third option here. Oh. So let me just do it. So I'm going to write in again and say transports fats and hormones. And a third option maintains a constant level of extracellular fluid. Now it's only asking for 2, so just give 2. But some of you may have learned the maintenance one and know that that might come off writing or off the brain quicker than the other one of the other 2. Give one way in which lymph differs from blood. So what does lymph have or not have that blood does not or have? So main one is lymph has no red blood cells and no platelets. Blood does. And the last one there, name a major blood vessel that returns the blood in B to the heart. So your major blood vessel that returns blood in B to the heart, that's your vena cava. Okay. Now, it has come up before, a long time ago in 2006, and it was part of a section C question here. And you can see there's 2 sentences and 24 marks. The magic number is 8. So you have to think, okay, so 3 will go into 24 8 times. So you have to think, okay, how am I going to break this up? So I want to try and have correct answers here. So describe the structure of the lymphatic system. How many marks do you think would go for that? Give an account of 3 functions of the lymphatic system. So if we look at first, describing our structure of our lymphatic system. So we can say that the lymphatic system is a network of lymphatic vessels, lymph vessels. What's inside the lymph vessels? So within the lymph vessels is lymph. The lymph travels along through lymph nodes. Now, I'm not going to say what lymph nodes do, because the next question is asking you to give an account of 3 of the functions of the lymphatic system. So there's no point repeating myself there, because we're not going to get the mark. So it's a network of lymph vessels. Within the lymph vessels is lymph. The lymph travels through lymph nodes. We can say what lymph is because it's not asking us. So, or what lymph does have or not have. So lymph has no red blood cells. And no platelets. Okay, has no red blood cells and no platelets, but it does have, or it does contain fats. You could say they're fatty acids and glycerol. And plasma. So we've more than answered that. Have we described the structure of the lymphatic system. So we've said it's a network of lymph vessels. Within the lymph vessels is lymph. The lymph travels through the lymph nodes. The lymph has no red blood cells and no platelets, but it does contain fatty acids and glycerols and plasma. So let's look back again, the structure. So we can mention that the lymph vessels join up to two major ducts. So our lymph vessels, because it's about our structure, join together to form the right lymphatic duct and the thoracic duct. The duct. Then we can say these ducts empty the lymph back into the blood at the subclavian vein. Empty the lymph back onto the blood of the subclavian vein. So we've really gone a bit over and above there. So describe the structure of my lymphatic system. So let's look back at our answer. Is it to do with this? Are we answering there the structure? So it's a network of vessels. We've said within the lymph vessel is lymph. The lymph travels through lymph nodes. What is lymph? Lymph has no red blood cells and no platelets, but it contains fatty acids and glycerol and plasma. Lymph vessels join together to form the right lymphatic duct and the thoracic duct. And these ducts will enter the lymph back into the blood at the subclavian vein. So we've really gone there and done a really good answer on describing the structure of the lymphatic system. So the second part of the question says, give the account of three functions of lymph. So our three functions of lymph. So the first function of lymph is transport. What's it going to transport? So it's going to transport fats and hormones. Actually, I'm going to say fatty acids and hormones. Because technically, actually, the fatty acids will have been broken down by lipase into fatty acids and glycerol. So transports fatty acids and glycerol. Maintenance. So maintains a constant constant level of extracellular fluid. And defense against disease, it will filter bacteria. Okay, so they're the only two questions that at leaving cert they have been asked. But I did find, so look, could it come up? I don't know, but link it in with human nutrition, link it in with your defense system, and link it in with the circulatory system. I think I forgot to say the circulatory system at the beginning. But here is a mock question that I came across. So let's look at this mock question. So let's read it first, and it's 30 marks. If it's 30 marks, then that would be found in your question 16 or question 17 of your A, B, C, and D. So state two functions of the lymphatic system. Give two structural differences between lymph vessels and arteries. Give two ways in which lymph differs from blood. Through which structures do lymph return to the bloodstream? What are lymph nodes? Give one function of lymph nodes. And explain why lymph nodes may sometimes become swollen. So let's look at this now. So state two functions of our lymphatic system. So we've just answered that in our last question where we gave 3. So we can say it transports fatty acids and glycerol. We can say defense against disease. In that it filters bacteria. Part 2. State 2 structural differences between lymph vessels and arteries. So one we do know is that lymph vessels have valves and arteries don't have valves. So lymph vessels have valves, arteries do not. Lymph vessels are blind ending. Arteries, aorta, are not blind ending. Okay, give 2 ways in which lymph differs from blood. So the main one we know is lymph has no red blood cells and no platelets. Blood has red blood cells and platelets. Okay, number 4. Through which structures do lymph return to the blood system? So through which structures? So where does the lymph go back and join the blood? So that is your subclavian veins. Okay, so it's not the ducts, it's because the question is through which structures does lymph return to the blood? Okay, so to the blood system. So that's your subclavian veins, or clavian vein. Number 5, what are lymph nodes? And give part 2, give one function of lymph nodes. So 5, part 1, what are lymph nodes? So lymph nodes are swellings along the lymphatic system, or lymph vessels. So lymph nodes are swellings along the lymph vessels. And the second question was, what is the function of the lymph nodes? And the function of lymph nodes, the first most important one is it'll filter bacteria. And the last question, explain why lymph nodes may sometimes become swollen. And they may sometimes become swollen because it's an indication there's an infection, and that infection is being fought. It's been fought by the lymphocytes. So explain why lymph nodes may sometimes become swollen, VI, and that is an indication of an infection being fought. And it's going to be fought by the defense system. That there is the lymphatic system.